So I picked up alcohol when I was 13 years old. At the time, I didn't realize it was going to be a progressive illness of addiction.
What helped you pull out of your addiction and turn the corner?
So when I went into rehab, I looked at my life and my patterns and my behaviors and my habits and my self-limiting beliefs. And I said to myself, I have to be ready, I have to surrender, right?
So when did you know that you had this thing inside you to now make a difference in the world and share my story?
That came about when I started working with the Amy Winehouse Foundation. And
What's up, everybody? This is Marcel Clark, and you know this is Hustle and Grow. I have Lauren White with me all the way from Bali. How we doing, Lauren?
I'm good, I'm good. It's 5 in the morning here, so I'm like ready to roll.
Oh my gosh, thank you for getting up at this time in the morning to jump on the show. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
So tell us about your story, because I know it's all about mental health and mental wellness. So let's tell me how you actually breached that industry and what made you start your journey.
So basically, the reason why I do what I do is pretty much because of the battles that I've been through in my life. And at the age of 18, I battered addiction, so I got sober from drugs and alcohol, and I had some issues with food and depression, anxiety, and I was in a very, very dark place in my life. And the reason why I was in a dark place in my life was because um, I had incredibly low self-esteem at a young age. I didn't really have, this understanding of like happiness and belief in myself. And I had some trauma in my childhood that led me to pretty much picking up substances to change the way I feel, because substances for me were the way of not feeling my feelings. It was the way to get out of, my self-limiting beliefs or, fear of my future. So, I picked up alcohol when I was 13 years old. I know that's very young, but at the time, I didn't realize it was going to be a progressive illness of addiction, right? I just thought it was going to be drink, and I just thought it was going to be fun. And then as years and years got on, it started to become worse and worse. And by the time I was 18 years old, I actually went into rehab and changed my life around. And it was very tough to do that because, to be 18 years old and to admit that you've got a problem and then go and do something about it, but also feel very different than most people my age. I was at university, I was doing a degree, and then I was in rehab and I thought my life was over. But then I realized that my life had just started. So when I'd come out of rehab, I started working with Amy Winehouse and her parents, not her, she had passed away, but her parents, to go into schools to do talks around addiction. And that was when my whole life around addiction, helping people with addiction, motivational speaking, um, doing one-to-one coaching and stuff like that started. So that was the start of my basically my career. And what I do now is I help people battle addiction and change their life around.
What helped you pull out of your addiction and turn the corner? And then how are you using that to help others?
So I basically changed my life around. So when I went into rehab, I looked at my life and my patterns and my behaviors and my habits and my self-limiting beliefs. And I said to myself that, I can change it if I can, if I want to, but I have to be ready. I have to surrender, right? So I had to make that decision to do something different. So I had to look at my environment, who I was surrounding myself around with. I had to stop going to clubs and bars at that time where I was drinking 24/7. I had to put boundaries in with other people when I actually, didn't really want to do those things. I had to stop people pleasing. I had to, look at my triggers, a lot of my triggers. So I do this with my clients a lot. So I get them to look at triggers, that trigger them off. So like family could be a trigger. Friends could be a trigger. a situation or a place or a location can be a trigger. So with my clients, I talk to them about habit loops and the way that our brain forms habits and stuff like that. Um, and if I do those things in the daily life and then start to recreate a new purpose of my life, my old purpose was going to clubs every day, going partying, being around drugs and alcohol, being around people that, don't make me feel good, um, you know, being in this negative spiral. And then when I come out of rehab, I started to run half marathons. I started to go to the gym. I started to eat well. I started to write with my journal. I started to get out. I started to travel the world. And those were my things that recreated my new purpose. So now what I do with my clients is I look at them and I say, how do we look at your life and see where you are and try and change it in those ways, shape, and form? Hope that answers the question.
Oh, you definitely answered the question. Nowadays, a lot of like, especially high profile people or celebrities, when they find themselves in a situation, the first thing they do is go, I'm going to rehab.
Yeah.
The question is, does that really hurt the industry though? That because a lot of times they kind of try to use that now as like cover to say, look, I'm trying to change. But they really are just basically doing that just for cover, but they're not really putting in the work. Do you think that impacts your industry overall when it comes to, like really helping and health awareness and helping people move forward?
That's a really good question. I don't think rehab's for everyone. I don't think that rehab is the answer. Um, if I'm totally honest, the only thing that rehab is really, really good for is having time and space away from the substance and having time and space away from the environment, right? Like you're put into somewhere for a month for the first time in your life where you don't have temptation, and you have that time to sit and be still and ask yourself questions of like, what do I want out of my life? Where am I going? What feelings am I feeling? Stuff like that. But it's not the answer. So if people going into rehab for that reason, it's not going to help them when they get out of rehab because it's just going to be a quick fix. It's about daily work on yourself. It's about you know, looking at yourself, looking at your behaviors, and then also being able to have those temptations around you in the real life. Um, but I don't see there's any harm in going into rehab if you can go into rehab, but I don't think it's a quick fix.
It's interesting because you definitely are touching on behaviors and environment. And I've always wondered about like addicts that, maybe they are able to, let's just say go to rehab, but they come back and they're right back in the same environment.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I mean,
Hmm.
it was seem to me that it becomes a cycle then at that point, right? So when you're talking to your clients and you're trying to move them forward, do you put a real big emphasis on that?
Yeah, 100%. I always say to them, without coming across in a bit of a rude way, I always say to them, like, there's this really annoying saying, which is like, if you go into a bar every day, you're going to drink. If you go into a barber every day, you're going to get a haircut. You know what I mean? If you go into your old environment every single day and you're facing your addiction with people that are enabling your addiction, you're going to drink eventually, unless you've got this unbelievable willpower. Do you know what I mean? But early on in sobriety or early on, when you're first giving up drinking drugs, it's very, very hard to have that willpower. So that's why a lot of addicts they end up going 10 steps back, because they're going back into those old ways and those old environments. And it's also triggering off some sort of trauma response in them because it's familiarity of what the addiction and the using is. Do you know what I mean? Imagine, you know, just for example, being at home and being in a place where you were doing heroin every day. Like it's a hard place to be. And some people have done it. I've seen people do it. When I got sober, if I'm totally honest, my first 5 months I was still going into clubs and I was sober, but it was very hard. And I don't know, at the time, look, I got sober at 18, so I don't suggest anyone to do it, but obviously I did it. Um, but I had to work on myself on a daily basis. But like I always say to my clients, like, really, really ask yourself who you're spending time with, you know, what's around you, what's triggering you off. You would even say, like, stick with the winners. Like, now I surround myself around people that are entrepreneurs, people that give me positive light, people that push me forward, give me, the advice that I need. And those are the people who are going to help me stay sober because they're the people who are going to radiate positivity and energy rather than the people that are going to put me down and make me feel like I want to drink. So environment is everything. And it's actually something that people don't talk about enough.
At your lowest point, what motivated you to keep going and what brought you back?
That's a very good question. Um, my lowest point in my life was when I was 21 years old. Um, I actually was sober at the time, so I wasn't drinking or doing drugs. I basically got myself into a work addiction. So I talk about addiction very, very like highly in the sense of it's not just drugs and alcohol, it can be anything. So I've had food and work and relationships and people pretty much. And I was at a point in my life where I was working like 20 hours a day. I was addicted to working, making money. I had like four different jobs at the time. And I made myself very ill. And I tried to kill myself because I couldn't deal with life pretty much. I started to have really uncomfortable symptoms with something called colitis because what was happening was my body was rejecting my addiction to work, and then it was obviously forming illness. So colitis is an ulcer in the bowel. And I got put on like incredibly strong steroids. And I ended up going a little bit insane and then putting myself back into a treatment center for a month. And I think that was the first time in my life that I didn't feel like there was a way out. Um, and I'd hit my rock bottom and I was only 21 years old. And I, yeah, I look back now and I'm like, yeah, you wanted to die. You didn't want to live anymore. You didn't want to be there anymore. And it was very hard. And what got me out, I think again, the same thing around little pinpoints of people in my life saying the right thing at the right time. And people would say to me, what do you want out of life? And I thought the only way to live life was by how much money I had, what car I was driving, um, if I had this person in my life, if I was like, living the dream of what everyone else's dream was. But I wasn't truly happy. I wasn't fulfilled. I wasn't doing what I want to do, which is my purpose, right? And then I ended up really sitting down with myself and asking myself the questions of like what truly makes you happy, and none of it did. Um, and that for the first time in my life, I decided to stop doing a lot of the things that weren't make me happy in life. And it was a pinpoint. It was like a thing in my life where I was like, I cannot do this anymore. And I just took a step back. And I don't know how, but God came into my life and God asked me the question of like, where do you want to be? And then in the next 3 weeks later, I got offered a job to live in Hong Kong. So I moved to Hong Kong. And that was when my whole life changed because for the first time in my life, I got to be whoever Lauren wants to be. Not my family knew what I was doing or my friends knew what I was doing. I got to kind of just live my own life and rebuild my own life. And it was an eye-opening experience. So I always say to people, if you get to the chance to travel, go travel the world, go see things, go take yourself out your comfort zone. And when you start to have that zest for life, that for me was okay, I can actually do this now.
Wow, that's an incredible story. I think a lot of people can definitely relate to that. And I think that's beautiful that you said, basically said, you started living your life the way you wanted to live it,
Mm.
and not worrying about what everybody else is thinking or telling you you should do. It's really about saying, okay, this is what I want to do. And that total reset you received, I know that had to be liberating.
Mm.
Just to, again, a lot of people don't live their lives for them; they live them for other people. So I think that's a huge deal. So when did you know that like you had this thing inside you to now let's go save others and let's like make a difference in the world and share my story and impact and mentor other people? Like when did that come about?
So that came about when I when I started working with the Amy Winehouse Foundation. And I always had this, my mum would always say this thing to me when I was sober. She'd always say, like, the only way to get out of your head, I know the only way to get out of yourself is by helping someone else. And at the time, I just found that an incredible thing because, like, I put my hands up, like, as an addict and as someone that, has all these mental health issues. It could be a very selfish illness. I'm always thinking about myself. I'm always in my head. I'm always talking about, how I can, do this, be this, that, and that's unfortunate of the illness, right? It's a very selfish illness. And I started to realize as life got on that actually to save me is to save other people. And that became a purpose to me. But it was when I went into a school for the first time with the Amy Winehouse Foundation. And I was with this heroin addict. He was sober. He was like 15 years sober. And his name was Dave. And he was next to me. And I was only meant to be there just to, like, watch what they were doing. And he turns around to me and he goes, "You're going to share your story." I was like, "No, no, 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 I'm not. Like, I don't do that." And he goes, "Yeah, yeah, you're just going to share it to 50 kids." And I was like, "Whoa, this is too much." And I ended up just talking to these kids. And I don't think I understand the wave of, like, you know, proudness that came out of me when I did that talk, and kids coming up to me saying to me, "What you said really, really helped me," or, "You really changed my life," and understanding this and understanding that. And I think for the first time in my life, I actually came to realize that this was my purpose. And this is something that, you know, is truly, truly, truly going to, change the world in one shape or form. And then, I've done a lot of things in my life. Like, I'm very diverse as a human being. I've done social media, I've done events, I've done brand partnerships, I've done, you know, influencer management, I've done sales, I've done fitness because I used to be a fitness instructor. But I always go back to speaking and helping. I always go back to giving back because it's how it makes me feel. Not that I'm being selfish, right? It's not just about me, but there's something that I get when someone turns around to me and says to me, "You've changed my life." Even clients of mine, like the other day, a friend of mine was like, "You're really helping me today." Like, it gives me so much satisfaction. So the more I do it, the more happier I am as a person, the more that other people are happy too.
So when in your world, do you like have a specific emphasis like mental health? Is it drug addiction? Like what's the thing that like touches you most and what you like to like try to help people with, the most?
So if I'm totally honest, it's actually not drug addiction that I like to help people with. Obviously, I like to get people sober. But what I like to help people with the most is finding their authentic self. Um, Going back to, yeah, like what you said, truly what makes them happy. Um, like their childhood, playfulness. So many people don't have fun nowadays. Like, it's just really like, it's sad. I don't know where you guys are in America, right? But like in the UK, people don't do anything other than work. They work 10 hours a day. They go to the office. They, go home, they go to bed. And I think there is a huge interlink with drinking and using, with repetitive behavior with their life. Do you know what I mean? I see so many people just going to the pub on the weekend because they've got such high stressful jobs. I'm not saying for them to not do their high stressful jobs, but I'm saying like, find an amazing hobby, go salsa dancing, go on amazing hikes, have a work-life balance. So a lot of my clients that I work with aren't just about, drugs and alcohol. They're about trying to become happy in their life by giving themselves life. So I've got clients that range from like 30, or I've even got clients that are 15, that are young, that are, like have battles with like exam stress or living the teenage life. Or I have clients that are 40 and they're like high stress CEOs that, I've got one client at the moment who um is a workaholic, and a lot of them are workaholics. Do you know what I mean? Because when you're so stressed and you're in that environment of stress, what do? You pick up drinking drugs. So it's kind of like, for me, helping them realize that there's so much more to life than those things. But when you said rightly about living for other people, I think a lot of them do have this, a lot of them are perfectionists. A lot of them are high strung. Um, they're so scared to fail, and they have this like weight on their shoulders where they think that they need to, do everything. And that leads them to some very dark places because they don't feel like they can just like, let go.
Yeah, I mean, right here in the United States, it's the same thing. I mean, it's really always about work, 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 achievement, goal setting. Always trying to move up the career ladder. So yeah, the pressure is here too. When I was reading about you, it said that you work with high achievers with toxic behaviors. Talk to me a little bit
Yeah.
about that. Like, what are you seeing when you work with that type of person?
Yeah, so like I just spoke about how a lot of high achievers have a lot of incredibly like intense stress. A lot of them, there's a reason why someone is so successful, right? Because they keep going, and they're so good at what they do, and they strive to be the best. A lot of them strive to be the best. And being a CEO of a company, you are basically looking after and managing a team. And a couple of my clients that are so successful, um, pretty much are amazing at what they do, but they're stressed all the time and they're overwhelmed, and they um then turn to some toxic behaviors, which are not just drinking drugs. It can be anything. It can be, locking themselves in a room for like 5 days and not wanting to get out, or, you know, having bad sleeping patterns, or being on the phone 24/7. That's one that's very common, like just literally addiction to the phone. Can't can't rest. And then it's also affecting their physical, right? So, you know, they have their diets really, really slacking. They're putting on weight because they're overeating. They're not training enough. They're not, being with their wife or their husband. So it's all a knock-on effect to the main thing, which is being stressed or being overwhelmed, or, being a perfectionist and stuff like that. So with my clients, I usually help them kind of navigate their life and change different patterns in their life, um, to help them try and relieve that stress. So I'll give you an example. I've got one client who is American, and he's like a workaholic. He works so much. He doesn't have any time to himself. To the point where actually one day he was having heart palpitations and thought he was having panic attacks. Because it stems into another thing, right? Our mental will stem into a physical sensation, which sometimes can lead to some very, you know, really intense situations like me with my work addiction, it ended up being colitis. Um, they do say that stress is formed into illness, right? So he was having heart palpitations. So we looked at his, his daily habits and his daily routines, and we started to incorporate rest. Started to incorporate time with his wife. We started to incorporate recovery. We started to incorporate slowing down, meditation, breath work, going for daily walks, looking at his diet, and then actually he became a better boss. He became, better at his job because he wasn't so overwhelmed and stressed. And I find this very common nowadays, with people that have work addictions or want to keep going because they want to be so successful, but what they're doing is they're self-sabotaging. And you can still work smart, but not hard. And that's how I work, right? You can still be a really good boss and still let go. Life is worth living. Life isn't just about how much money you're making, like you said, like I said, or how much you're working. Life is about that balance. And I think when you start to see that balance, you start to become happier as a person. So that's what I potentially do.
That's incredible. I mean, you knocked it out of the park about work-life balance. I think that that's totally underestimated, and when you can bring your equilibrium into play, I think, like you said, it's a world of difference because and sometimes, especially in my country, it's a thing about money, power. Everybody tends to believe that that's everything, but it truly isn't. So, and the other thing you said that I thought was really cool too was that addiction isn't just drugs, right?
Yeah.
So you can be addicted to work, you can be addicted to sex, you can be addicted to a lot of different things. So the way you go about managing and handling those things will have an impact on your overall life. So in the world of addiction, what can we all do as a society to impact addiction and do better in that category?
First things first, which is something that I talk about a lot, is that I think the words, like you said, the word addiction it's such a stigma. People shy away from the word addiction. If I say the word self-sabotage, they're like, oh, I do that. And then if I say the word addiction, they're like, oh, no, 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 no. Like, I'm not an addict. Like, because addiction is, oh, you're a heroin addict on the side of the street, or you're a whiskey drinker on a park bench. Like, you think your life's over. But actually, the word addiction is pretty simple. It's you're doing something on a daily basis and you cannot stop. No willpower alone will allow you to stop. The truth of the matter is that there are more addicts than you know. You can be a functioning addict. You can be the most successful person in the world. You can make so much money. You can, be Elon Musk. I'm not saying that Elon Musk is an addict. It could be, but but you know, anyone's an addict. No race, no sex. Do you know what I mean? Like I identified myself as an addict, and I was, I came from a good family. I had everything on the outside. I was making good money, but yeah, I couldn't stop drinking or doing drugs. So the first thing that I always say to people is just take away that expectation that it's a bad word. It's just a word, and actually to the flip it, people that have addictive personalities and people that are addicts are actually very successful people, you know, people that actually are very talented. And um, I think if you put your addictions into healthy addictions, like for me, I go running and you know, I work and and I have a very, very good way of dealing with that. I can be the most successful person in the world. So there's nothing wrong with being an addict. So if you take away that kind of expectation of being a bad thing, then actually you can realize that there's nothing wrong with it. Um, and then more about kind of like understanding what addiction is. I think more people need to understand what it is, and if it comes up in your daily life and how to do something about it, and not be scared to do something about it if you want to admit that you have that issue. Um, because at the end of the day, like this is the same thing with mental health. Mental health and addiction both are, you know, oh, I don't need to deal with that now. Oh, I don't have a mental health problem. Oh, you know what? Like you have to be strong-willed and you just don't feel your feelings. And I think that actually mental health is important. And you are meant to feel your feelings. You are meant to get vulnerable. You are meant to be truthful to who you are as a person because that's the only way you're only ever going to be truly be happy. So I think we just need to normalize it a bit more, if I'm totally honest, and not be scared of it.
Yeah, I think like you said, I mean, this removing the stigma in itself, so people will be more comfortable about where they are in that space, would definitely have a long term impact. So, I mean, you definitely making a difference in the world. What do you see yourself doing? For the next 5 years over there. You're in Bali now. We don't know where you're going to be 5 years from now, Laura. So.
I know, I know. So I do go back to London quite a bit, and I do see myself going back to London, a little bit more, doing more talks. I'm doing more talks online, doing more workshops online, doing talks of retreats as well. I'd love to write a book as well. Um, I'd love to write a book about addiction. And then I want to do more talks on stages. I'd love to do a TEDx talk. And I feel like it's coming. I feel like it's growing. So, and then get more clients, which is something that I really want to do as well.
That's beautiful. So, I mean, I have to clap my hands for you for trying to change the world one step at a time. That's a beautiful thing. Tell my viewers where they can find you.
So you can find me on www.laurenwhitespeaker.com. Um, and my Instagram is at I am Lauren White. And if anyone is struggling with addiction or anyone wants to speak to anyone, I'm here. I'm working one-to-one with people that want to change their life around from the smallest to the biggest. And if anyone wants to hear my talks, I promote my talks on my Instagram and my online workshops as well. And yeah, that's it.
Well, again, we've been graced with Lauren White's presence. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
You're
Everybody, I
welcome.
want you guys to hit the like button because we need a lot more Laurens on the show. And again, I'm Marcel Clark. This is Hustle and Grow. If hustling's in your DNA, ride with us and watch us grow.